So in this first preparation video, we're just going to look at different types of circulatory systems and make a comparison between them. We're going to look at the circulatory system in an insect, a fish, an earthworm, an amphibian, and then a human. As we go through the different systems, we need to be conscious of the advantages and disadvantages of each type of circulatory system. So the first thing we're going to do is just go through the basic components of a circulatory system and discuss the two types of circulatory system that you can have, which is a double circulatory system and a single circulatory system. And on top of that then, a circulatory system can either be open or closed. So it's those four things that we're going to look at initially in this video. Okay, so what is a circulatory system? Well, to answer that, we need to look at the components really of a circulatory system. So every circulatory system, no matter what or how complex it is, it'll always have a pump. Okay, now the pump is often called a heart, and as you'll see, the complexity of the hearts in different organisms varies, okay, with mammals having the most complex heart. The second thing a circulatory system has is a series of tubes, and those tubes are often called blood vessels. Now, in a later video we're going to look at blood vessels, because there are 5 different types of blood vessels that you need to know about. And again, the types and the number of blood vessels in organisms differ, with humans having the most complex types of blood vessels. And the third component is a fluid. Now, very often that fluid is called blood. Okay, but it's not called blood in all organisms, okay, but nonetheless there's a fluid in each circulatory system. So there's the components of it. Now, in order to understand what a circulatory system is, we need to understand this term double circulatory system and single circulatory system. Now basically those terms relate to the arrangement and layout, if you like, of the heart and the blood vessels. You'll understand that more once we start looking at images of circulatory systems. But just for now, you need to know the definition of a double circulatory system and that of a single one. So if I just write that in for you. Okay, so I've written in the definitions then of the double and the single circulatory system. With a double, what happens is that blood will pass through the heart twice for each circuit of the body. With the single circulatory system, blood passes through the heart only once for each circuit of the body. So like I said earlier, I don't expect you to fully understand those definitions at the moment, because we do need to look at the layout of circulatory systems, but you need to know those definitions. Okay, the next thing that we can do is classify whether a circulatory system is open or closed. So if you have an open circulatory system, what's basically happening here is the blood will actually leave the blood vessels that it's travelling in. Okay, now the insect is an example of an organism having an open circulatory system. So if I just draw a very simple diagram for the moment, to help compare between open and circulatory system. If the box here is the heart and the vessels coming out of that heart are the blood vessels, what happens is the blood vessels don't meet, so there's a big gap between the vessels, and then the blood can actually pour out of the vessels and they go into what's known as a hemocoel or a body cavity. So that's an open circulatory system where the blood actually leaves the blood vessels. With a closed circulatory system, which occurs in humans and fish and amphibians as well, and earthworms actually, the blood vessels are ultimately joined. So if we have a basic heart here, the blood vessels come around like so, and then they're actually connected by a series of special blood vessels called capillaries. Okay, so in a closed circulatory system, the blood is kept within the blood vessels at all times, and there's a lot of advantages to a closed circulatory system compared to an open one, which we'll discuss shortly. Okay, so we're going to look in detail now at an open single circulatory system, which is found in insects. So I want to go through this diagram and maybe draw a couple more of my own to help you understand how this system works. But basically, if we look at the insect down the bottom here, what you've got is what's known as a dorsal vessel. Now, dorsal means back. Okay, so it runs along the back of the insect, and every now and again you get a swelling in that blood vessel, which acts as a very simple heart. So you've got multiple hearts running down the length of the insect, which is just really sort of swellings within a blood vessel. Okay. Now, if we look at the top diagram, what that is showing is just a section through the insect. So we've cut the insect down that way, and we're looking face on here at the heart or the pump and the blood vessels here, which run from the dorsal vessel right down to the ventral. Ventral means underside, so here would be the ventral surface of the insect. So the blood vessels run right around the body of the insect. So one thing that you can see now is the blood vessels do not meet. That's what makes it an open circulatory system. And the body cavity, as it's called, all this region here is called a hemocoel. Okay, and there should be an A in there for the spelling, hemocoel. So this is where blood now actually pours out into the body cavity or hemocoel. Within the body cavity, you're going to have the cells that make up the organism. So all these square boxes I'm drawing, I'm trying to represent a mass of cells that are actually found in this region of the insect. Okay, so there's the open aspect of the circulatory system. The pump here, or the heart, has a number of valves to it. So there's a valve here just at the exit of the heart. There'll be one on each side. Okay, and then it has these things called an ostium. Now that's singular. Plural would be ostia. Okay, now these ostia are actually essential for the blood returning back to the heart. You can just see some arrows here a little bit faint, but there's arrows actually pointing to an ostium there. So this is the general layout of the open circulatory system. So what happens is this pump here, it'll contract and its volume will decrease. So that means it'll get a slightly higher pressure, and it'll force the blood out of the heart and around the blood vessels in the same direction. Okay, so both the left and the right side here, blood is flowing downwards towards the haemocoel. And once the blood gets to the haemocoel, it passes out into the body cavity, and nutrients can then diffuse into the body cells. Okay, just want to remind you at this point that in insects, oxygen is not transported via the circulatory system. That's transported by the tracheal system. So as the blood enters the haemocoel, nutrients diffuse into the cells, and then the blood has to return back to the heart. So the way it does that is the blood will enter via these ostia and actually go back into the heart. Now these ostia are actually like valves. So when the heart actually contracts, the ostia close to prevent blood coming out of those holes, and so direct it into the blood vessels. But when the heart relaxes, the blood is going to be sucked back in, so the valve actually opens when the heart relaxes. So that's how the blood returns back to the heart. Now, the problem with this type of circulatory system is down to pressure. Okay, now a circulatory system is there to pump a fluid around the body, and for most organisms the blood has to travel very fast. Okay, so the blood speed, also known as the blood velocity, must be fast. Now the only way to actually pump blood fast is to have a high pressure. Okay, now when you have an open circulatory system, the pressure is low, very low. It's very much like having a hole in a tyre. Alright, if a tyre's got a puncture, the pressure in that tyre is very, very low, and that's why it sort of comes soft. So with an insect, the actual blood flow is slow. Now that is a disadvantage because you're not getting nutrients flowing rapidly to the tissues. However, with an insect it's not too much of a problem because the oxygen that the insect needs and would need very rapidly is actually transported by the tracheal system. So for an insect, the fact that the blood flow is slow is not too much of a problem because it gets its oxygen via the tracheal system. So this is a major issue here about pressure, and we'll be discussing it further when we talk about the other circulatory systems. All right, so we shall be returning to that. Okay, so that really is the single circulatory system that's open, and we'll move on now to the next sort of level of circulatory system. We're going to move up in complexity, and we're going to look at the earthworm. Right, so this is the earthworm circulatory system now. This time it's going to be a closed circulatory system. And it's still going to be single. So if we go to this diagram on the far left, what I want to point out is that the circulatory system of the earthworm has 5. In this diagram they're called accessory hearts, but very often they're called pseudo hearts. Okay, again, it's just swelling of blood vessels which act as a heart, so it's a very basic, simple heart. But you've got a main dorsal blood vessel here running along the back of the animal, and you also have a ventral one which runs along the underside around about there. So the pseudo hearts here are responsible for pumping blood from the dorsal vessel down to the ventral vessel. Okay, and you have a main heart here which involves pumping blood along the dorsal vessel and bringing blood back from the ventral vessel back up to the dorsal vessel. So it runs in like a circuit in a one-way direction there. Okay, so if we look at this diagram on the right, here's our pseudo hearts again. They call lateral hearts here, but if you just call them pseudo hearts, we can see that when the heart pumps, blood travels out of the heart in one direction and goes all the way around to a network of capillaries here. So this is where the circulatory system is now closed, so blood doesn't sort of leave the blood vessels. So these capillaries are down by the ventral vessel. Okay, and then blood is pumped back to the heart via another blood vessel straight back up to the heart and the dorsal vessel. So you've got this complete single circuit of blood flowing in one direction all the way around. Okay, so this circulatory system is a little bit more efficient compared to the insect because it's closed. You actually have a higher pressure, which means that the blood flow is faster. That's just compared now to the insect. Okay, so if we have a little quick comparison, here's the insect again on the left. You can see that blood is leaving the heart in opposite directions. It goes through blood vessels and then into the hemocoel here, and then through the body tissues. With a closed circulatory system in the earthworm, that hemocoel is not there. You actually have these capillaries which contain the blood within the vessels. So that's your basic closed single circulatory system. Again, we can adapt this type of circulatory system to be more efficient, and that occurs in the fish. They have a closed single circulatory system, but they have more developed hearts, more developed blood vessels, and of course the fish have gills which oxygenate the blood. So we have to take that into consideration as well. With the earthworm, if you remember, oxygen just diffuses across its body surface into the blood. So with the fish then, it's still closed and single, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more efficient at transporting oxygen. So the fish circulatory system now. Couple of points here. As I've said, it's closed, it's a single, but this third point, this is where there's a major difference between the earthworm and the fish. The fish has a more conventional, more sophisticated heart with 2 chambers. Okay, so that's where I want to start, is to look at the heart. So here it is. Okay, now the two chambers, this one here is the top one, even though it looks at the bottom, it's actually the top chamber, and it's called the atrium. And then this lower chamber here is called the ventricle. Okay, so it's a two-chambered heart. It also has heart valves here. Now those valves, and there's another one here, the heart valves will actually ensure that the blood flows in one direction only. Okay, so for example, when this top chamber, the atrium, contracts, the valve here will shut to prevent what's known as backflow into the blood vessel. Okay, so these heart valves are very important. The other thing you can see is this dark region here and here. That's known as the wall of the atrium or the wall of the ventricle. And with the ventricle, we say it has a thick muscular wall. Now, the reason why it's thicker than that of the atrium is because the ventricle has to pump blood all the way around the body of the fish, and in order to move that blood, as I've said previously, you need a high pressure. So when that ventricle contracts, it creates a high pressure. Okay, creates a high pressure. So that means this part of the circulatory system here, this blood vessel here, that's the blood vessel that will have the highest pressure because it's the one right next to the ventricle. All right. So that's the heart, the ventricle walls, the atrial walls, the valves, and the pressure that's actually generated. So the highest pressure is here. That's going to be then the fastest blood flow in that region there. So on the face of it, it's a step up from the earthworm, but it still has its problems. And it's the problems now that I want to look at. The main problem is whenever blood enters or goes through a capillary, the consequence of that is the pressure actually drops. Okay, so with a single circulatory system, the heart will beat once, and then the blood will just do one circuit of the body. Okay, so that's what it means by the a single circulatory system. With the fish, it has a gill circulatory system. That's just the blood vessels that go to the gills. And it has a systemic circulation, which basically means body. That's the circulation that goes around the body. So it's everything on this diagram, but not the gill region. So everywhere down the bottom half of the diagram is the systemic circulatory system. So when the blood goes to the gills, it will have a drop in pressure. So the pressure will drop. And as a consequence of that, the blood speed will reduce. Now, this makes this single circulatory system very inefficient, because as it passes through every set of capillaries, not just the ones in the gills, also the ones down here in the body or the systemic circulation, the pressure will carry on dropping. So each capillary set of capillaries will drop the pressure, and it will also then drop the speed of the blood. So with this one then, the delivery of oxygen becomes inefficient because the blood flow is so slow. So if I just write that in then. Okay, so I've added that in. The delivery of oxygen to the body organs will be very inefficient. Now, in addition to that, we need to talk about the delivery of things like nutrients as well, because every time the blood passes through an organ, which is where the capillaries are, the blood will also lose nutrients as well. So as well as the speed of the blood reducing, and therefore the oxygen being delivered is inefficient, you also get the loss of nutrients as well. So the reason why this is so bad within a fish, it's because of the arrangement of the organs where the capillaries are and the actual flow of blood. So I want to draw out another diagram to show what's known as a series flow of blood, and hopefully that will explain why oxygen is inefficient being delivered, the pressure drops and the nutrient levels drop as well. Okay, so this little diagram here shows what's called a series arrangement of the organs and the blood flow. I've just put in the heart, the gills and some body regions, the head, the liver, the gut, the trunk, the kidneys and the tail. So basically all of these organs are in what's known as series. Alright, they're in series. So what happens is, if we start off at the heart, here we have high pressure, okay, and we have the fast blood flow. Now as the blood goes through the gills, what we get is a drop in pressure, there, and that means we also get a drop in blood speed. And also a drop then in nutrients as well. So all of this reducing of pressure, reducing of blood speed, reducing of nutrients actually occurs as the blood goes through each body region. So as the blood goes through the head, you'll get another drop in pressure, another drop in blood speed, and another drop in nutrient levels. And that continues at each point along this circulatory system until you get back to the heart, and then when the heart beats again after one circuit, the blood will come out of the heart under high pressure and the blood flow will be rapid. So this is quite a disadvantage for a circulatory system, having everything in series. That's basically one after the other, all right, like a single file arrangement of the body regions. So again, even though it's inefficient compared to the circulatory systems of other animals, but this still works for the fish, and there's a reason why this is okay for the fish, and it's to do with the fact that the fish is cold-blooded. Alright, in fact, every organism we've talked about so far has been cold-blooded. Now, I'm going to mention more about that when we look at the human circulatory system. Alright, but there's an important link here with the ability of an organism to generate its own body temperature, or not, in the case of cold-blooded organisms, and the type of circulatory system that they have. So I'll come back to that one later. But that really is the circulatory system for the fish. Everything you need to know is there. The next organism we're going to look at is an amphibian, And the amphibian, I've put it in because it marks a kind of transition point between a single circulatory system and a true fully functional double circulatory system. So it's kind of an intermediate between the two, which I hope will help you understand the advantage of having a double circulatory system. This is the diagram of a frog or an amphibian circulatory system. Now, the frog is also cold-blooded, so I better make a note of that. It's cold-blooded. Now, as I said earlier, this is a kind of an intermediate between a single and a true double circulatory system. This isn't a fully functional double circulatory system, but it's almost there. So I just want to take you briefly through it. The first thing here is there's a pulmonary circulation. Now, pulmonary means lungs. So frogs have lungs which oxygenate the blood. So I want to explain in this section the colouring of these blood vessels. Any vessel that's coloured in blue is known as deoxygenated blood. Okay, and anything in red is known as oxygenated blood. Okay, now in this diagram we've got a kind of a purplish coloration. Now that is known as mixed blood. So there's oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mixing together. And that's the problem with this frog circulatory system. We can see that it has a heart, but this time it has a 3-chambered heart. So you have 2 upper atriums and you have a central ventricle. Now, that's what's causing the problem here, because if we look at the flow of blood, you've got blood going to the lungs. It gets oxygenated, so the colour goes dark red, and then it goes back into the atrium, and then it gets squirted into the ventricle along with deoxygenated blood. So in here you get the mixing of the blood in the central ventricle. Now that is a problem because it means you have less oxygen being transported around the body. Okay, but there is a little advantage to this, and it's the fact that blood is released from the heart and goes around the body at a higher pressure. So the fact that the blood returns to the heart from the lungs, which it didn't do in the fish, so this returns back to the heart and it's given an extra boost of pressure that forces it around the body. So you actually have a high pressure here. Okay. So that is, an advantage. The low oxygen levels is a disadvantage. Okay. So that's, I'm not going to say much more about this because you don't technically need to know about the amphibian, but I think it'll be a good comparison now for when we look at the double circulatory system of a mammal. So that is all I want to say about the frog. So the mammalian then, double closed circulatory system. This is what it looks like. It's got a 4-chambered heart this time. So you'll have 2 upper chambers called the atriums, 2 lower chambers called the ventricles. And there's 2 sides to the heart. There's a left and a right side. Now, the convention when drawing the heart is to draw it as though it's in the chest of someone. So when you're viewing a drawing of it, it's like you're looking at someone. So that means it's in the reverse order, if you like. So what I've done, I've put an R here because that represents the right side of the heart. It appears on a diagram as to be on the left, but it's not, so you must call it the right side of the heart. Then obviously the other side is the left side of the heart, so please be aware of that. It's drawn as though you were looking at someone. The heart would appear like that in someone's chest. So there's the sides of the heart. Now, to have a true double circulatory system, you actually need, in effect, two hearts, and that's what we've got. We've got two hearts that are actually joined together. We have the right side of the heart and we have a left side of the heart. Now, the right side of the heart, if you look at the colour in the vessels and in the chambers, it's all blue. So the right side of the heart is there to pump blood from the body. So the blood returns from the systemic circulation to the right side of the heart, and then the blood is pumped to the lungs. The blood then returns to the other side of the heart, which is the left side, fully oxygenated, and then the blood is pumped then again around the body. So that's the only way you can get a true double circulatory system. You have one side of the heart that deals with deoxygenated blood, and the left side of the heart that deals with oxygenated blood. So the advantages of that, again, is if we look at the left side of the heart, blood is going to be pumped around the body from the left side, so it's going to be pumped under high pressure. So even though the blood has gone through the lung capillaries, the pressure will drop. It'll go to a low pressure, as it does when it goes through any capillary, but the blood enters the left side of the heart and is forced out under higher pressure, so you increase the pressure on the left side of the heart. That means you have a fast blood flow, which means oxygen is delivered very efficiently. So oxygen is delivered fast plus efficiently around the body. Now, the pressure is high, but as we'll discuss again, as the blood gets further and further away from the heart, the pressure does actually reduce. Okay, so the highest pressure you will get is within this part of the circulatory system here in this blood vessel. The other thing is the organs are arranged in a parallel fashion, unlike the fish. So if I quickly draw that out, you've got the heart here. We have the lungs here. Under the heart then we could have the liver. No, we'll have the gut there. Okay, so I've drawn out a really quick sketch of how the organs are arranged in a parallel fashion. We'll talk more about the arrangement in another video. But basically, if we just look at the left side of the heart, which is here, as blood comes out of the heart, it runs down a blood vessel and then you get a branch off. So you get a branch off that goes to the gut, the liver, and the rest of the body. So because you get this branching here, it doesn't affect the level of oxygen or nutrients or pressure as the blood is flowing down, because the blood, as it goes down the body, is not going through organs. So it's not going through capillaries, so the pressure ultimately is not reducing as much as that in the fish. Okay, it will reduce a bit, as I said earlier, but not as much as in the fish. So this is known as a parallel arrangement, where the organs are sort of on top of each other, if you like, one above the other, rather than in a single file arrangement. So this makes the transport of blood far more efficient. Now, let's tackle the aspect of the warm-blooded situation. Now, all mammals and in fact birds are all warm-blooded. Now, warm-blooded organisms have a far higher metabolic demand. That means they have a greater requirement for oxygen, so they need an efficient circulatory system to deliver the oxygen to meet the metabolic demands of the organism. So the major use of the oxygen for warm-blooded animals is that of respiration. Respiration not only produces ATP energy, but it also generates heat, which makes organisms warm-blooded, and that requires a lot of oxygen. And that's why mammals and birds have to have this double circulatory system. Without it, we wouldn't get enough oxygen being delivered to meet our metabolic demands. Okay, so on the right hand side here, I've just written the important points about the warm-blooded nature of mammals and birds. Just mentioning now about only a double closed circulatory system can deliver oxygen efficiently to meet the metabolic demands of the organism. So that completes this video on circulatory systems. So if you complete the activities in the workbook, and hopefully this has helped you understand the circulatory systems a bit better.